Hello, my friends. So I have the privilege of sitting down and having discussions with some amazing moms in my community and having a beautiful community of homeschooling moms to actually tap into and resources just locally. Since we've moved to this area, there have been so many incredible wise women around here that have just helped to encourage me in my mothering and homeschooling journey. And one of those women is Kailey. So Kailey has a beautiful plethora of children, and they are just fun and rambunctious, bunch of boys, one girl. And not only that, but she is an incredible human from inside out, all the things. So I wanted to have her come here and just kind of speak to us about her journey, give us some encouragement, give us some what not to do's, maybe tell us a little bit about homeschooling and mothering and how it has panned out for her. And I just know she's going to give us some wisdom that's going to be really helpful, I hope, for many of you, if not all of you. So Kailey, introduce yourself, tell us how many children you have and how long you have been educating them at home.
I'm Kailey, and we haven't even known each other that long, but kind of got connected up here, and that was really fun. And our kids just kind of hit it off, and we hit it off.
We were Instagram friends for
Instagram followers in real life. Mm-hmm. And I have 6 kids ranging from almost 14 to almost 2. My little bookends born on the same day. Kind of fun. And I've been homeschooling them the whole time. So since my oldest was about 6. So doing this a little while. Yeah. Doing it a little while, learning a lot as we go.
And what brought you to discover homeschooling, and how did you know you were gonna educate your children yourself?
I was raised in a very friendly to homeschool community. So both of my aunts homeschooled. My mom was a little bit more hesitant, but she was a little bit more like, I want to make sure my kids aren't missing out on anything. And then my dad was always pretty concerned we were going to be not keeping up with public school. Okay. So there was definitely that pressure in my home, not a lot of freedom to homeschool. And so my mom ended up putting us in public school. Okay. So that definitely was a big part of my journey, because I felt like I could have done maybe a little differently, had been given different opportunities.
Did you see other homeschoolers, or did you have some people
And all my cousins were homeschooled.
Oh, okay.
For the most part. So I loved the idea, I loved the freedom. But mostly for me, when I got older, I just always knew I wanted to homeschool. I knew it was going to be a lot of work. Just kind of my observations with people who had homeschooled. Okay. But I knew that I wanted to do it no matter what. And for me, it was not, I know a lot of people homeschool out of fear from what their kids may learn in public school or whatever. And I definitely want to know what my kids are learning. But for me, it was more like the opportunity to be able to shape what they get to learn.
That's cool.
You know? And I think early on, I was really inspired. No matter what we do, we can't do it from fear. And so I needed to decide if I was going to homeschool. I didn't want to do it from a place of fear. I think sometimes you can start there, you know, like.
Can be the launching pad.
Yeah, fear can be a gift, you know, in nature. Like, I got to get out of here. Animals use it all the time. But we're not supposed to stay there. And so actually, really prayerfully, when I started my eldest, when I started Caleb, Deuteronomy 11, which I actually have. Yeah, if you want me to read it.
Absolutely.
But Deuteronomy 11, 18 through 20. Commit yourself wholeheartedly to these words of mine. Tie them around your hands and wear them on your forehead as reminders. Teach them to your children and talk about them when you're at home, when you are on the road, when you're going to bed, and when you're getting up. Write them on your doorposts of your house and on your gates, so that as long as the sky remains above the earth, you and your children may flourish in the land the Lord swore to give to your ancestors. And I just kind of thought, I love that. How do I do that if they're gone from me all day?
Right.
You know, and I always knew that I wanted to homeschool, but that was like, I can do this. Yeah. Because we're supposed to be together, you know, and it wasn't like judgment on everybody else who decided not to homeschool. I was just like, this is my calling, you know, and it wasn't like easy from the get-go necessarily, even though the early years are easy. easier.
We think they're not until they're gone.
Until you're teaching them and you're like, this is really quite easy.
Until you're Googling under the table.
Yeah. So for me, that was kind of like I can't do that well if they're gone.
Right.
And I want them home because I like them, These
little cherubs that we have.
I like them. So
that's really
that was
good.
our start.
That's awesome.
For me.
Yes. I think that's like a big part of even why, like Phil and I are both obviously second generation homeschoolers, but the reason we picked the baton back up is not only because we had good and bad, but mostly good experiences, but we were together. There was like, this is just how our family is going to roll. And then there was just no way to put them in school. We were traveling and like, I'm not going to put you in activities and things that take you away from us or have us tied down. And so when you first stepped into your homeschooling journey, basically, we'll just call it that. We'll just be cheesy and journey it up.
It is. It's a journey.
It is. And we'll just use the word. But when you first started, what kind of style or what were the resources or things that you started to obviously absorb and learn and see from others?
I had a cousin who was doing Charlotte Mason.
Okay.
And so that really intrigued me because so much of it was the younger years, be outside as much as you possibly can. And that was so natural with all boys because by the time I started Caleb, I had 4 boys, because I had 4
6 years
under 5.
Okay.
Just so fast. So I was like, we can do outside time. That's very easy. And then the more we got outside and we played, I was watching and observing this. And I was a baby understander of the philosophy of Charlotte Mason at the time. But what I understood of it, I loved.
Right.
And so I was like, wow, they really do come up with their own questions, and Caleb's little and he's out there going, how come the birds stay up? And how come, and he's just asking all these questions that I realized came so naturally just living. And so we started there.
And you were able to perceive that was how learning was taking place, which I think a lot of new homeschooling families, were thrust into the world or whatever, and they have these books in front of them and they don't hear that part of, everyday life can be learning. Yeah. So having a little bit of the Charlotte Mason background and some of these other styles that obviously spearhead that, like learning that it is observation and real world experiences that teach the most is like so helpful when they're young because then it becomes the habit.
And that natural science of life. I read early on some kind of stat. They did a study following these kids that did the real A-type learning where the parents wanted to label everything in Spanish and early reading and all this different really like organized education. Right. And then they did, and there's nothing necessarily particularly wrong with that. They were just kind of sharing this was one more rigid method of early education. And then they did more natural science learning. And that's not the same thing as interest-led necessarily, although there is a lot of interest that we take note of and stuff. And the natural science learners over like a decade of time made better long-term learners. Right. Instead of this list of like, we've got to accomplish all these things and perform all these things and show all the things we know and regurgitate all this
information.
Burnout
is real, even for kids.
Yeah, and that was essentially what they were getting to was like, they can tire of something they were made to love.
Wow. Yeah.
And so I loved that it was working for us and that the natural science of observation, and because education is really very much observing the science of relationships, people, animals, the earth, like all kinds of different relationships. And so I just found that was really natural for us early on. And I really liked the fruit of what that was. So any nature that we decided to draw, it wasn't forced. It was more, here's what they just had an experience with, and now they're gonna show it, And so it was really beautiful, especially in the early years. And I tried, because I was still learning about Charlotte Mason, and I love the philosophy, even though we're not like follow every single thing to a T. I really, really have followed as much as I can pretty closely as I found it to be time and time again, just an excellent education. So we did a lot of literature early on through another curriculum. And naturally I found in this other curriculum, we loved the literature, but there was a lot of paperwork that came with it. Yeah. And so we found ourselves going through a lot of busy work And I noticed the frustration wasn't the reading, but it was the like almost mindless busy work.
Yeah.
And I was realizing like, I'm going to burn you out.
Pretending
This
you've
doesn't
learned something
really
by filling in blanks
matter because he knew it, like it was all there.
Right.
So it was just kind of this natural process of leaning more and more towards a Charlotte Mason education of in those early years. Okay, tell me back. We don't have to do all the busy work.
Right.
And then let me know, what did you learn? What did you observe?
Like reassessing and like recognizing that your end goal is this, so it doesn't really matter if the paper is filled in. If I'm hearing you talk about it with friends or like you're telling me, that's the part that's like the beautiful part when you hear them on their own talk about it later. Like, you don't need a paper for that.
And I say I was a little spoiled because my oldest loved to learn. You know, so he loved to read, loved to learn, and so he kind of set that vanguard, you know, ahead of all my other kids. Like, oh, he's always got a book in his hands, or Mr. Random Information, and they were just kind of inspired to.
Those annoying firstborns, just nailing it from the get-go.
But it doesn't always work out that way, and so I was really thankful that he just genuinely loved to learn and loved to read.
And there's no discouragement if any child is a firstborn and you're like, why is my child? Or if you start homeschooling later, especially if you don't start homeschooling, or if you are you've already burnt your child out, and you're trying to pull back and reevaluate and all those things,
or
it might take a little bit.
If a child gets used to a method of learning where they're just required to regurgitate something, and there's no inner sanctuary reached of learning. You know, Charlotte Mason would talk about the outer sanctuary of learning versus things that have really gone to the core and you can see that they've really learned them.
Right, that's good.
You know, and so I think like you were talking about starting homeschooling later, some people get overwhelmed with the idea of a Charlotte Mason education, that it's like you've got this checklist of stuff you have to do. And for me, what made me like, this is what I want to do eventually was her, the Holy Spirit is the ultimate teacher. And I was like, sold. You know, like for me, I was like, because, and the emphasis on that every home is different.
Yes.
And every kid is different. My harder to educate came later.
There's so much freedom if you can grasp those three things. Holy Spirit, your child is different than every other child, and your house is different than every other house, and you are different than everybody else.
Right.
Like that's the whole beauty of it. If you can actually find that to be a freedom versus a, a detriment.
Yeah.
Right.
And then I began to kind of, as I continued in my journey, look to the more veteran homeschoolers. What piece of wisdom do they want to give? And we live in a time where homeschooling, there's so many resources available. It can be overwhelming.
Especially the free
if
ones.
you're starting.
Now it's so easy because everything's free.
Right. And some of these veteran homeschoolers, some of the most wisdom that I gleaned was time with your children and simple. Keep it simple. Keep it simple. And in seasons, if it's not serving your family well, and it's this just drudgery, sometimes it has to be let go for a while. You can always come back to it, you know? And so we went through seasons where my kids got a little older and it was like, that needs to wait. And it's okay. We'll come back to it. Because as this kid came to that, and then it was a better time, so I'm like, hey, join us. We're going to go back over this that we skipped last time, you know? And so for me, I was like, my kids need to know how to read and write, do math. Those are like non-negotiables, you know? And then a lot of the extra things on top of it, either foreign language or Plutarch or whatever you're introducing at different stages. And I really try to stay away from like lists, like we've got to, because I've always found it not to be particularly life-giving. And I, right now, throughout different trying more literature-led curriculums, because I hadn't familiarized myself enough with Charlotte Mason, I found that I really didn't like all the busy work, like I was saying before.
Right.
And then I discovered, AO is a ton of amazing literature. And then I can base our vocabulary and our definitions and our grammar and just all of the other things based off of what we're reading, you know? And then child to child to child, what do you need more of? You know, and kind of getting to know your individual children. And I said my oldest was like, he loved to learn and he set a great example, but that doesn't mean that every kid is going to be the same kind of learner. And I found challenges down the way that was like, oh, that's really not working for you. Okay, we'll take this a little slower, you know? And I think the beautiful thing throughout the years that I've come back to again and again is like that veteran mom was saying, keep it simple. And if you find things that are just like, they become more like a checklist,
Right.
you have to have the freedom to go, that's not as important right now. And so a lot of, throughout the years, lots of questions, lots of meeting new faces, and what do you think of this? And I like your kids, and what do you do for this and that, all these different stuff. So lots of conversation. And I find myself over the years saying the same thing, and obviously you'll have different conversations. We're going through different seasons, or I'm learning different things with different kids. So there's different conversation, but there's always kind of a repeated thing. And I found kind of coming out of me. And one of them was habit training and heart connection. And so I was like, that's kind of our theme in our home. It's become our theme where it's like the habits matter. Rhythms and routines are important. They create security, but they aren't our law, especially if somebody needs me to tend to their heart. And that the heart connection, it will trump the habits, so it's like, I don't encourage laziness, but maybe laziness is not what's happening right here, but somebody's acting out or somebody's behaving a certain way. And it's like, whoa, what's going on? And so it's that getting to the heart of each kid. It takes time,
Right.
And sometimes in a big family too, having a lot of kids, it's like, you're thinking, I don't have time for this right this second, but I need to have time for it. And it doesn't have to take up the rest of our day, but there have been different seasons where I'm finding one person needs more, just that heart connection. And so I'm like, okay, so this week, I'm going to have you do a lot more independent reading on your own. And I'm going to have you guys wait until I'm done. We'll work on these things, or maybe and you just kind of have to be, I've had to be willing to be flexible with my day. And if you find yourself being like, I have to stick to my rhythm or my routine, sometimes it can be really frustrating. And then you find yourself like nailing your habits. This is what we do every day. And then you're missing your kids.
That's good, yeah.
And so I was like, I don't ever want to sacrifice them for the sake of a checklist. And yet at the same time, they need to understand there are things we do have to get done.
Right.
So and this really hasn't happened a whole lot through our journey, but if somebody's, recognizing that their little tantrums are getting a whole lot more attention, it's my responsibility as the mom to kind of sleuth out, okay, you've been well tended to. We need to get these things done.
And that's where I think where we were talking about like the Holy Spirit and like being Holy Spirit led Christians is it just gives you so much, just so much that you can pull from when you're discerning where the attitude's coming from. If we just need to have a day where we just sit and chill and just read books, or if we just need to do Bible reading and move on, or we need to go outside, or whatever it may be, or a special breakfast, or if it needs to, like, everything needs to get shaken up. But we do have to rely on that, like, okay, this moment of discerning. And that's where we do have a special skill that not a lot of educators get to have or get to implement, is that we get to go moment by moment and deciphering what's happening in that child at that time.
Well, and nobody else cares for your child the way you do.
Right. And knows them, right.
And a lot of people come to homeschooling feeling totally unequipped, totally, I'm not smart enough. Like, I've heard that so many times over the years. I think I'm going to mess my kids up. I'm not smart enough.
Are you loving enough?
I don't have a college education, or don't have all these different things. Not only is there a list of amazing people throughout history that have marked and shaped history that did not have a college education, but it's never too late to learn, and sometimes just sitting down learning with your child. I mean, I would say that the majority of things I know because I've been teaching my kids. And it doesn't mean that I didn't learn anything in school. And another thing that I loved about Charlotte Mason, she said it's an education twice blessed, once for the student and for the teacher. And so much of it is this, really that mother culture of, I'm learning with my children. I'm coming alive with my children, and then if there's things that stick out to me, I don't want to dominate their lessons, but at the same time, I don't hesitate to be like, isn't that amazing? Like, this is wonderful, and taking the time to just wonder and marvel together at these different things. And we've learned, and I've learned a lot. And so I think for me, that was just like, I decided I love this method because, first of all, the literature is just phenomenal. the recommended readings and things have just been so life-giving. And I know that
No
was
matter
something.
what method you do, you should probably go through different Charlotte Mason, Ambleside, obviously, but there's other ones that have lists of books that you can go through. And it's like, I don't care if you have to do whatever other curriculum, just still go through the books.
Oh, yeah.
And collect them.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You'll be benefited, right?
Well, and we've been through some really good curriculums that they've got like a good blend of things. And there were some that I was like, this is excellent. And I could take it or leave it, and get rid of it. And you have the freedom to do that, But I love that literature has been such a foundation of our homeschool days and all of our learning and different things like that. But I feel like I got off a little bit from what we were.
I think that's excellent. That was super helpful. I think what you're saying with the just taking that time to work through whatever's happening in the moment with your child, or just kind of discerning the moment, what would be for me, like, a question would be, what would you drop? Like, what would be non-negotiables for a day for you to feel like maybe everything's going well, but that something's going to have to flex. Like, there's going to have to be some ebb and flow in the season or whatever it is. What are you said, obviously, reading, writing, arithmetic kind of thing, but what are some other things that are in your day that you really value?
Yeah. I love morning time. Obviously, having little ones come along the way and stuff, morning time will look different when you have a little tiny one. Sometimes it's easier right after you have a baby, and then they start to toddle about and walk and talk back, and
not easy at like 2 to 3.
And then you're like, okay,
or just
morning time's going to be a little later, So we've gone through different seasons. Like, my youngest is not a great sleeper until recently, and so it's been like, he's asleep, I'm sleeping, so we're not doing an early morning. You can still get up early, and so my olders will have like their list of things that they can do on their own.
Okay.
And so if I'm down with the baby because he's been up all night or he's woken up several times, I will wake up a little later. And that's not our normal, but that is for the season that we've been in recently. And I have had to give myself the freedom to be like, I'm a better mom if I'm well rested.
Right.
And there's a lot to be done. And so he's asleep right now, and so I'm going to sleep too, Yeah. And so it doesn't mean it's just like free time for them in that. So I'm taking our current kind of rhythm and routine that we're kind of shifting out of back to more of an early morning because he's sleeping better. But we were in kind of a season where it was like, these are the things to get done and can get done on your own. And it would be more free playtime or drawing or coloring for my younger, my daughter. And then, but everybody has math they can do on their own. And if we don't need to read like the guide together or something, they know what they're doing. They can do it. We can go over it together later. They have different free reads that they can do on their own on a daily basis. These are our pretty regular things. But in our morning, whether we're getting up a little later or it's our early morning, my friends call it basket time. Probably heard.
There's so many power hours.
Right. Morning time, basket time, family time. But it's just that time when I have all my kids together. And so I have spent the last couple of years kind of trying to get all the things done we can do together in that morning time.
Right.
So like devotions is non-negotiable. Not in a legalistic sense either. It's just, it's life-giving and it's fun because whatever we've decided to go through, either we're doing like the Bible project and then we're kind of watching videos together and we're talking about it and we're reading. And I'll be honest, I think we got lost in Leviticus. We took a break and we were like, okay, well. And then sometimes my older ones will be going through a devotional in their readings and they'll be like, can I share this? And I'm like, absolutely.
That's like a mother's dream. Like, yes, please.
Yeah.
The fruits of my labor.
Yes, do what? And sometimes it's profound and other times it's just really simple,
Or springboard for more,
Right. Another thing that we have done with that morning time. So whatever we use for devotions, most of the time we're just reading straight from the Word. And then we'll go over verses in the Word that we're memorizing and then continue to add to. So we'll do scripture memorization together. And that's kind of fun and funny because you've got the older ones. Maybe sometimes they're doing great and then maybe they're kind of not really paying attention and all of a sudden they see the 6-year-old like hammer out, a ton of verses and they're like, oh man, I can do better than this,
That is something that I wish, I'm like, okay. Phoenix is now where he can repeat with us as well, of course. But before it's like, little Phil, just me and you. We're
Yeah.
in this together.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I better memorize as well.
Which is
Give you
fun.
some competition.
Yeah, totally.
Right.
So
the peer pressure.
right.
The good,
Yeah.
the positive peer
No
pressure.
shame. Oh my gosh,
yeah.
I'm like an anti-shame parent.
Oh yeah. But
I mean, the closest thing to
think
shame is
he
like
thrives off
my
of
eyes.
doing. I'm like, okay, if I actually commit to doing this with him internally instead
Right.
of
Yeah.
thinking I'm going to make you do this and
Yeah.
I'll listen, I'll be the one reading the card.
Yes. So however we do that, we'll work probably for a solid week, maybe a little more depending on how much we're memorizing.
Okay.
And then we'll add a new one, and then we'll touch on the old one. So it kind of, and there was a season for sure when we did not do memorization. It was just lots of different life things going on. So we read the word every morning. And now we've kind of reintroduced that back into our day. And it's kind of fun because then they realize I can do that and I can memorize things, and it's
Right.
empowering. And our local group, it's kind of fun because our end of the year especially, we'll get together and a lot of the kids will share, like from our
cool.
co-op,
Yes, yeah.
poetry that they've memorized or things. And it's always inspiring.
Right. It's
you know?
inspiring to me.
It is. It's pretty amazing too. You've got these little some
Right.
kids, and I think if we can watch and learn and be inspired without feeling like a failure.
Right. Like you
You
said,
know?
no shame, no stress. And I think that's a big part of, right. Like,
There are seasons
yeah,
where you're like,
needing that.
well, we're working on none of that right now. And that's okay.
Right.
And then there are other seasons where we're working on none of that, and we really should be.
Mhm.
And so we're in more of a season like that where I'm reestablishing some things that have really worked well, and the baby's older, and so it's now we're kind of reestablishing our morning time and different things, and it's really been life-giving. And I'm realizing we've let some of these things slip in more busy, hectic season, and we're bringing them back and really enjoying our time together. So memorization, reading the Bible together, we'll add in foreign language. And so it's fun. I'll expect, obviously, age level things from all of them, So that's really fun to do together, a little conversational.
Do you include poetry or some of the, okay.
So we will memorize a poem together, and then they can kind of read their own poets on their own. And I don't always make them, but for years I did poetry was their copy work.
Right.
So a lot of times I would allow interest-led with poetry. If there's a poem that you're just little and you're gouging your eyes out because you just really don't enjoy this poem, move on.
Right.
Find one that you're just that was funny, or did you hear that about the bird, or whatever, and then that'll be their copy work. So a lot of incorporating what we're already reading into our extracurricular stuff. So it's not busy work, and there's more of a connection with what they've read, and then now I want you to do your copy work, or underline for me 3 to 5 words that you don't understand, and let's look them up. Let's learn what they are. So I incorporated a lot of in the early years, vocabulary, grammar, capitalization, all of that stuff in whatever we were reading. So it wasn't all these extra sheets and paperwork and stuff that I found we just kind of got lost in.
Well, and I don't believe, maybe some obviously do, or some obviously do learn that way, but very few people really do learn from filling in a blank.
Well, and now that my older,
the connection of ideas is very Charlotte Mason, obviously, with that.
Yeah, we just read this poem, and now I have a little bit more of an understanding from learning this word, what the poem means.
Right.
And so it's very life-giving. It has been. So we'll do poetry with our morning time, and Shakespeare sometimes, not always, but my kids have really enjoyed Shakespeare, especially the introducing children to Shakespeare versions, and Usborne does a really fun picture version of Shakespeare, and just kind of these little introductions to kind of the humor and the wit and the history, and so they've loved it. I know some people, I don't know, I haven't met a whole lot of people that give Shakespeare a chance that don't end up loving it in some way, but it's very easy to read it and have just overwhelming bite of Shakespeare and just be we can't do Shakespeare.
Well, making sure it's age appropriate for if you have the Usborne one or a different children's version, and even if you're not interested in, maybe start there too.
And I think that was another philosophy that I really was inspired by, was to not go through what our children are going to learn and kind of pick out the things that we're not really interested in, because they're people.
That's good.
Our children are born persons, right? And so they may look at a painting that you're that is hideous, and see something
Right.
that you're like, I would have discredited that completely. So we'll do, we have been a little lax in this season with classic composers, but I definitely have noticed a surprising amount how much that benefited us when we started pretty young. I was like, I don't know if classic art's really that necessary, but they recommend it, and so we started, and we would do the whole look at a painting and what do you observe? And I was blown away at how that kind of gradually became so fun to them. I never would have guessed, because I'm like, I got a bunch of rough little boys, like classic art, and then the more that I kind of learned, like, wow, you just never know when you put something before your kid, the connection they're going to make with it as an individual, And so sometimes we will just kind of skim through all the stuff we're interested in, and that's us.
Right, yeah.
And
we should do that, but not necessarily when we're setting it only before children. Just decide. I mean, I suppose if you're incredibly conservative or you're trying to dissect things in your own way.
And you'll come across different artists that you're like, we're not going there yet.
It's always good to peruse what you're about to display before your children, probably, but not in the effort to completely mold them into mini yous.
Right. Yeah.
And your likes and dislikes, and be careful, and even being careful about presenting your opinion before they've given theirs, maybe. And,
absolutely.
Those kind of things.
Absolutely, because you're kind of pre-digesting.
Right.
And they might chewing something up for them that they're still chewing
Little Phil loves abstract art, and I actually didn't. I kind of grew up with the idea, or I kind of had the idea maybe 10 years ago that abstract art was a little too abstract. Couldn't possibly be a representation of a true artist. And now I love it because he's actually kind of shown me how much I can love it. In a sense, we've learned together.
Totally.
And I didn't have to tell him how I felt about it before I actually changed my opinion.
And how you felt about it changed.
Yes, I know. It's
because
amazing how that can happen.
Little person you adore, you're like, wow, I never would have seen that.
Yeah, and just learning more about the people and just seeing more. I think when you understand a little more of what it is, it's color, and it's beautiful, and there's things to it.
And I think one of the surprising aspects about that for me too was as I laid things before my kids, a feast, right? Charlotte says, setting a feast before your children's table, or putting their feet in a large room, with all these different things, their mind and their heart will make something different than their brother or their sister, so you never know what's going to come out of what you introduce. And I've been amazed too at things like, composer study or art, how simple it can be. And then the questions that will arise. Why is she dressed like that? Why does she look so sad? How come their faces are covered? Things that then the kids will come up with. And I'm like, that's a good question. And so much of our journey has been kind of seeing where we're getting a lot of that, life kind of happening on a certain subject. And I'm like, wow, we just had a great conversation about sin nature. And we looked at this picture.
And you didn't have it penciled in
for
for that day.
We didn't have a devotional set aside or whatever. And it's these moments, it's that waking up and going along the way and sitting down, and you're there to interact with your kid,
That's really good.
and listen. So
excellent.
That's been our journey.
Now, how do you balance all of this, Kailey? You have way more children than I do. And it's easy to get overwhelmed. And I think that I definitely feel for a lot of the kind of COVID homeschoolers or people coming into homeschooling because of necessity or just jumping in. And there's so much information out there, and you join a few homeschool groups, and maybe if they're not niche enough, you will get overwhelmed with everybody's opinion and different methods and things you need and all of the things. So there's that side, but then also you're a mom and you're a person, or if you work from home, or if you have an illness. There's so many moms that I know that have autoimmune diseases where they're laid up, they're or pregnant, or morning sickness or bed rest. There's so many different people's needs with this, and I just think I've just heard so many beautiful stories of women homeschooling, because they're just so powerful, and women can do everything, and it's incredible, and they do it. And it's, like you said, they didn't really balance all the hats maybe, but they knew which ones to drop or whatever it is. But how do you do it in your home? You have older kids, you have 6 children, you have, kind of a busy life.
Yeah.
You definitely have a busy life, kind of.
It is busy. I say no to a lot, you know, because you can't say yes to everybody for every kid.
She said yes to me.
I did.
I did. Yay, me.
No, but I just mean like, it's okay to say no, and it's okay to have seasons to say no. And then we've had seasons where we're like, yeah, let's do it. Let's go for it. You know, and I think that comes back to that Holy Spirit. You know, what is life-giving? And am I all of a sudden trying to get all these things done, and how am I feeling? You know, but I was going to say, there's so much that's come to my mind. So I'm like, how do I not be so scattery? Because I don't balance it all the time. And my kids are very helpful. And so I think it could be overwhelming if you're a parent. You're like, my kids are really unhelpful. They're not happy unless they're playing video games or they're doing this or whatever.
Or they're
you know?
used to a ton of activities.
Right.
Or
maybe a mom pulled their kid out of school and they have
going
no
out
idea how.
homeschooling on the road,
Right.
where every day was like seeing something epic too. And here we are in Serbia.
Right. Yeah. What national monument is this? You know?
Yeah.
Right. And so there's so many different places in which people come to homeschooling. And I would say with all the COVID stuff that you mentioned during just that whole craziness, that was a hard time to start. You know, so for anybody starting, that was kind of their like, we're doing this, like ready or not, here we go. And my biggest thing that I just kept telling people over and over and over again was like, don't try to be a homeschooler right now.
Right.
And not that you can't be, but come home, establish home. Rhythms and routines where everybody's doing well.
Yeah,
you know,
thriving.
you can add a little here, a little there. You know, the days are passing by. You're not going to miss out. You know, there are things that we feel, I think society has shaped so much of how we think about family and motherhood and children and time. You know, like our rhythm in this country in particular is so fast, and slow is okay. You know, and slow's been equivocated to lazy or not getting enough done or whatever. And sometimes slow is where you refocus and re-see each other and find the things that matter. And so I think like I was just telling people like that, we're like, what do I do? Because we're pulling our kids out of school. And I was like, read good books.
That's good. Yeah.
Be together, read good stories, and listen. You know, you guys will add as you go.
Right.
And as you feel more confident, you know, wow, we had a lot of really good conversation based off that one book, you know, whatever, you know, ask some friends what a good math curriculum is and just slowly begin to add and find what works.
Lots of walks.
Take lots
no matter
of
where
walks.
you live, we do this.
Right. But it was a hard time because a lot of people were finding that the fear thing was like, now I got to homeschool. And that's an okay starting place, but not where you want to stay.
Well, especially when distance learning became synonymous with homeschool. And it's like, those are very different things.
Yeah.
And it's okay as a homeschool, like to drop the whole distance learning thing and to drop the public school at home. And you're not trying to replace or duplicate that in the home. You're trying to, like you said,
and for the most part, you're really not missing out. You know,
right, exactly.
Really
that's always very shocking.
That's a different subject entirely.
That's like podcast number 2. When you really aren't missing out when you say no to everything.
There was an educator in the public school system for years. I can't remember his name. Based out of like the Midwest, and somebody was like, "Aren't you worried about socialization? Aren't you worried?" You know, just kind of those classic questions. And he said something so simple like, "Which one of my child's peers do you think he should emulate?"
Yeah.
And nobody really had a good answer. But it's just kind of the social thing that we worry about.
Well, and it's a pre-programmed question.
Yeah.
Like it's just since the dawn of having a child.
Yeah.
Okay, needs to be around other kids.
Yeah. Take your kids to the grocery store. Make them pay for stuff.
Go to the park. My goodness.
You know?
You always meet friends at the park when you're not in the mood to make friends at the park. If you wanted to have a quiet moment, go to the park.
Funny stories about those moments. But I was going to say, how do I balance it? I don't balance it all. And there are days where you feel like, well, today sucked, you know, and there's always tomorrow. And it is that tomorrow is always new with no mistakes in it, right? Anne of Green Gables. And then, but truly, it's okay. Right. Today kind of sucked. I'm not going to pretend that we got a lot done. And maybe we had attitude problems, or maybe just everything was kind of like, oh, he fell. Oh, we broke this plate. Oh, there are days like that. And you can't stress about it. That's life, you know? And so I think really learning to be okay with letting things go is so important without being all panicky that our kids are missing out on something. You know what I mean? And a couple of things. We watched a kids cartoon years ago, and there was like a comment, you know, and they're like, I think maybe it was Cars 3 or something like that. And it's like, how did you know that you could do it? And she's like, I never thought that I couldn't, you know? And so like personality wise, I was just like, I can do this, you know? So I know that that's unique to my personality, but I also feel like with other mothers, I'm also that person with a lot of other mothers. Right. You can do this. You can do this. Nobody loves your kid more than you.
You're like old instinct.
Nobody cares.
You're like, you can do this. You may not know it yet. You may not believe you can yet, but you can do this. Yeah. And I think that's the cool thing. I think we were talking about our personalities. Again, we recognize this is our personalities, but it is easy for me to look at so many different people and be inspired, but not feel at all like I need to be like them, or, you know, I can see a beautiful Instagram page with beautiful flat lays and all these little crafts and things, and like, oh, that's so good for you. I love that about you. And I actually don't feel any need to do that unless I want to. Right. And I know I can if I wanted to. Yeah. But I really, that's not something I feel like, there's not a competition or a comparison. And I think what you were saying about when you know a day sucked, it should be because you knew it sucked, not because that Instagram page that you wanted to look like said it sucked, or it didn't look like that. It's because you just knew, okay, this should have happened, or whatever. Right. There's a difference between being inspired by other people and being like shamed and like stressed out to be like them, or to think that that's the only way. And comparison is a tool. Right. It can be. It can be good, and it can be very
where it's
bad.
Like, okay, I could up it in this area. Right. I'm being lazy here. Yeah. I've had those. And it can be inspiring. Again, we're going back to the Holy Spirit. This is really a talk on how to follow the Holy Spirit. Make sure that you recognize those pricks when it's like, oh, am I jealous of that person's lifestyle or their kids or anything going on with their photos or whatever it is? Or you need to maybe up your ante a little bit. Maybe you do need to do a craft with your children. Sometimes I'm like, I need to do more crafts. No glitter. Right. Done it before. Right. Gets in the cracks. Yeah. But like, there's got to be this balance of just paying attention to what your instinct is, and like what you're, this is because I know that I need to introduce this, and we need to focus on this, or whatever it is. And community is good for that. That comparison in how it serves us. But once it moves past serving us and it becomes a master of us, and then we're like, oh, I'm not doing that, and I'm not doing that, I'm not doing that. Then all of a sudden we lose sight of our home. And then that's where we just kind of lose sight of everything, you know? And I think that's easy for people with for me as well, with some of the concepts of morning time and things like that, making sure it looks like you and your family. Yeah. And making sure, or curriculums in general, like for my free spirit side, whenever I feel like I have to do something, I always like start to question, why do I feel like I have to do anything? Right. Like, what am I doing here? Right. But then there's just times that maybe we do need to develop that habit of discipline. Yeah. And maybe it should absolutely. And it's a little grindy. It's a little, okay, this doesn't feel natural. This doesn't feel comfortable right now, but I know that this is what we're supposed to be doing. Right. There's those times too. The tears and math, you know, I know you want to give up on this, and, you know, but look, we're going to master this. We can do this. It's going to be discovered. You're going to figure it out, you know, and it's just, those are unavoidable moments. Right. Those are necessary moments. Doesn't mean just because it doesn't feel so life-giving that you give up on it, you know. There are those too. Right. But I was going to say the other thing. So I always thought that I could do it. So there's that. But the other aspect too, when I had my oldest, baby Caleb, it was a profound moment. And I have had a couple of people like, you should talk about homeschooling and mothering and all this stuff. And I'm like, I just don't think the ideas would sell, because they're like, you just need to be selfless. You know, like, it's just not very comfortable sometimes. Well, especially in our self-care, it should be so perfect. And it feels so good all the time. You're like, Right. So I had baby Caleb, and it was Christmas or Thanksgiving, something like that. And he was just unhappy. His stomach was bugging him. And so I had to leave, and I'm a new mom, and everybody's playing games and laughing, and I'm in the other room crying with my baby who's crying, feeling totally royally sorry for myself, you know, and maybe our culture would be like, she just needs to be seen, maybe, but in that moment, the Lord was like, you are going to be an excellent mom. Oh, yeah. And if you want to be an excellent mom, you're going to have to be selfless. And it looks like this a lot. And it was definitely, we've always had that kind of relationship where he's just like, I know what you want. What are you willing to give? And I was like, okay, I'm done throwing a pity party.
Yeah.
I am his mom. He needs me.
Well,
he doesn't want to go play games.
Yeah.
He just wants me. And I need to be okay.
And we've dreamt of this
with
moment.
that.
You know,
Right.
you can be like, I did anyway as a young
Yeah.
child. Like, I dreamt of sitting there rocking my baby, being the mom
Right.
over. Like, I couldn't wait for that.
Right.
And when it happens, you're like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm having to.
And it is that fast-paced culture. What's next? What's next? What's next? What's next?
Right.
I'm missing out. I'm missing out. I'm missing out, which I don't usually feel like I'm missing out. But that was like family and fun and all these things are going on that I normally get to participate in.
Just we'll insert sick children. When their child is sick and you
Right.
have to cancel something.
Yeah.
Or like, you're like, oh yeah, actually.
Yeah.
You have this moment of, wow, I actually really wanted to do that. Okay. Which is
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Am I mad at you for
Yeah.
being sick?
Yeah,
Like,
little-
what's wrong
Did you-
with me?
Did you have sugar?
Right. What food coloring is in all of this?
Blame it.
Something ridiculous.
Nothing to do
you
with
know?
me or my mother-in-law letting you
Right.
have anything. But
Not to say that food allergies are ridiculous. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying. But you know, that it was that if you want to be great at this, you're going to have to learn to be a servant and you're going to have to learn to be selfless. And so motherhood
you see
is,
why I keep her around. It's like, okay.
Just humble
The pep,
yourself.
yes, the pep
Just
talks.
kidding.
No, it's so true though. And
Right.
that's our whole faith, really.
And you don't
Like,
have to
you know.
lose yourself. Like, this is something you and I have talked about quite a bit. It is a selflessness that doesn't require you become nobody.
Right.
You know,
And
you
there's
actually
moments for
become.
self-care. That's
Sure.
It's not because you say one thing that you're negating
Yeah.
all the other side. No,
Right.
there's a balance and like,
Yeah.
and even self-care really is because we're selfless. Like when I
Right.
take a time for myself, it's not because I'm just me. I want to be for me. It's like, no, I know that that's going to make me the best for you.
Right.
And it's going to make me the best for my husband. And it's going to make me the
Yeah.
best, you know, for my kids.
And a good guide for me that I found in that was also from a veteran homeschooler, where she was like, you need to take mom time, but is it an escape or is it a refresh?
Excellent. That's really
You know,
good.
and I was like, oh, that's so good. And she was differentiating, are you leaving the job at hand and coming back feeling just as bedraggled and in drudgery? Because that's an escape. You haven't actually restored your soul. You haven't actually rested or done something life-giving and feel like I'm ready to return to the issues at hand or whatever. So that was a really good, like,
That's great.
binge watching a show sometimes is not life-giving. I'm not saying like nobody should do that. I'm
especially
just
if it's
saying
up all night and you don't
right.
get any sleep when you know sleep is
right,
one.
right. And the next morning you're like, here we are again. It was
Oops.
more of an escape, right? Instead of really refreshing to your soul.
Definitely the veg out
Yeah.
feel is very easy for me to slip into. Like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm on my phone scrolling through and I'm going to fix all the world's
Right.
problems by scrolling through all the problems.
Yeah.
I don't know what the thought process is.
You guys
there.
are just all crazy.
It's not, it's not
Yeah.
moving very fast, apparently, my brain, when I'm thinking, wow, an hour later. you know.
Right. Yeah. So just finding that, like, it requires selflessness, but you don't have to lose yourself and become nobody, you know? And a lot of people, when we'll go places, my kids are not perfect, not at all. But we've had very many moments where people are like, your kids are really respectful or they're really enjoyable, you know? And I'm like, I like them.
Yeah.
And some people are like, that's so
Right.
weird that you like your kids, or what a funny thing to say, or, and I'm like, you know, one lady at the park, she was like, do you beat your children? They're just so well behaved.
You're like,
And I
"Yes,
was like,
do."
I don't think that would have that effect, but yeah.
Like, who's going to say yes to that?
I know. Yep. That's it. You figured us out.
Well,
But
there
I
it
told her,
is.
I said, you know what? We
Right.
require a lot of respect and we give a lot of
People,
respect.
and that's the beauty of, like, I do love that about the Charlotte Mason. The whole concept that they are persons, like they're born
Yeah.
persons, is so important. Like,
Yeah.
and that's the whole thing with the education. When you're educating a person and an individual in your family, yes, there's just always going to be our own stuff
Yeah.
poured in, because we're not going to turn ourselves off and our likes and dislikes completely.
Yeah.
Just subconsciously, you're going to do that. But they are so unique,
Yeah.
and that's what you're really developing.
Yeah.
Their strengths and their talents and their gifts, and hopefully launching them into using those things for
Yeah.
good, right?
And the older years, it's really fun because you're still working on certain disciplines. You're still working on, okay, hey, we're still respectful, even though you're becoming more independent.
Or
And
when you're smart, like little Phil, you're smarter than me in that area. This is gonna be really bad.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to up my.
Well, and you're working on like more freedoms,
right.
privilege and responsibility balancing. It's going to look different in every home. You know, whatever the responsibility load is, what kind of freedoms are they receiving? And so that's not the same for every family. Maybe one kid works out on the farm and he's doing all the animals and all, like tons of stuff. And one kid's responsibility is like, take out the trash and make your bed, right? Like each family is going to have different privilege and responsibility to hash out in their own home, you know, with the older years. So
for you and your family, how do you navigate relationships and how much extracurricular activities you do and some of those kind of things? Because especially with the more kids you add, of course, you know, there's more interests and more things to do or you could do.
Yeah.
And it's very tempting, like you said, in our culture to say yes to so much and to think you have to say yes to so much, to say yes to not only soccer, but piano lessons over here and, you know, going to this co-op and being a part of this and all of those things.
It can be a lot.
Yeah. We only have one doing things. So it's, you know.
We're still figuring all that out, and it's kind of different as the years go forward. You know, we've tried a little bit of this lesson or a little bit of that. We have certain rules in place if you're going to choose something and you're going to stick with it for a solid year.
Okay.
You know, so like you're not going to do violin for a month and then be like, I don't want to. You know, like, no, we bought you violin. You're going to do it for a year. You know, like there are certain things that we're just like, if you're going to choose it, take your time. And you should take your time to decide if this is something you want us to invest in, because we believe in you guys. We want to invest in you. Yeah. You know, obviously with a big family too, you like can't put everybody in classical education or classical music or, you know, whatever. But that there are seasons maybe where one kid has been like my oldest, you know, it's like he needs to be able to do something extra. You know, not like necessarily as like a reward, but kind of that balance of like such a big helper. I want you to be able to also, you know, add these things that you want to do. What are your interests in, you know, and kind of adding to that. So much of my kids' interests currently, it's kind of fun because so much of them they can do at home.
Nice.
So like,
perfect.
Yeah. So like I have one that's like crazy into science. So we've been getting him those Mel kits.
Oh yes. Yeah.
You know, and so he's just like the chemicals and the, just all the different safety geared up, all that stuff where he's just having a blast with it.
That's great.
Because he loves the observation of science, you know, like experiments and all that stuff. And then we have others who, like our oldest right now, is really into blacksmithing. And so he'll just read books on blacksmithing and we let him make a forge out of like a barbecue. And like, he's just kind of experimenting with all this different stuff. Nice. And he has to prove certain things that he's done as far as like safety education and all this kind of thing. But it's really fun then to kind of like, that's where the interest-led thing is like, we did the things that are required of us, you know, like maybe. And I do think interest-led is very important, but I think that that can be to where we just follow our children's interest lead, and then we let any kind of like, and it can be done beautifully. I've seen it done very, very well, you know, but where it can kind of slip into this, like, there is no learning to take instruction or
the habits and the discipline.
Discipline, doing things that we don't enjoy or that we don't want to do, you know. Sometimes it can become where it's like, let's just do what you're interested in all the time.
I feel like most of that, like when you see, I mean, I would be an example. Like if I was to just purely go completely unschooling, it would be because I'm lazy.
Sure.
I know that of myself. That's why I do have to add some structure to our days. Maybe not necessarily 100% lazy, but just, I don't know. Yeah,
you know your tendencies, and
I don't mind being wild, and I'm very free, not to steal their slogan. But it's a great slogan, so it works. But to be, we are very, very much interest-led in a lot of ways. But I think it just really depends on the personality, and if you have those specific character qualities already, kind of those muscles built to
and some
take
people,
those things further, and you can pour into those interests. But I think for me right now, I recognize that we're not quite there where we can be purely interest-led, and that's where I do appreciate so much of the building of the character and building of the habits first before you just I would be 100% if it was, I could see that it was time, like if it was like, oh, you're ready to just take that you know, and run with it.
You get up, you get your bed made,
or if you can
go
see,
help feed the animals.
You're incorporating math and this into that thing, and you do hear of families that are so excellent at incorporating all of the you know the subjects into.
Yeah. And there's a lot of foundation that goes into laying it working really well as they get older. It's not just do whatever you want whenever you want kind of a thing, you know. It's like, okay, you've done your free read, you've done your reads, you know, you're supposed to do on your own, we've read together, you've done math, you've done all these different things. It's time for that interest-led stuff. Go do your blacksmithing, go do, you know, all of that. We did a program for a while that was bass, piano, guitar, like an app where they could take these online lessons.
Oh yeah.
And for a little while that was wonderful. And then they all kind of got to the place where they were ready to be like challenged. So I think the next stage is piano lessons for the ones that, you know, want to do piano. And then guitar lessons for, you know, and so like we'll start incorporating bit by bit.
Right.
You know, and I'm still working on the schedule of what that will look like for everybody.
The lesson thing is hard.
Yeah.
So I've been wanting to put on piano lessons for a while, and it's just like committing to a time and day and all those things for me is like, I can't imagine 6 children with different, just how to balance different interests when you say, okay, you can each have one activity. When you have 6, that could be, if you do a sport, it's like they've made it so it's, you know, 3 days a week.
Well, and it can be expensive. You know, it can be very expensive. And so for some people, I've read this on blogs and things too, but it's a great idea. Ask for birthdays or Christmas or whatever you celebrate. Ask for lessons or, you know, like piano, art, like said, and karate. So many and free things so they can dabble, I hate to use that word, or commit to dabbling for a minute on the free or the cheaper. Like you can do so many online things and see if they want to keep going, and then you can commit to the violin and the, you know, it's so which
nice.
is a lot of what we've done with the music stuff. It's like, oh, there's a clear interest there, you know, and so let's do that. But if you commit to this, you're going to commit to it for a certain period of time. You know, so I think that's just kind of an ebbing and flowing, finding out, are they enjoying it? You know, and are they ready to like keep moving forward in that, or should we reevaluate? So we've got the home interest hobbies that are kind of wonderful. Yeah, they're wonderful. You know, because they can just, there's so much going on at home, a lot of woodworking, you know, a lot of knives and all kinds of creative making.
Skills, and they become skills.
Absolutely.
I'm like, okay, so we'll invest in that because that is something you will need to know.
Yeah, and that's another particular about our homeschooling journey. Just from experience and with people and research and stuff, we're hugely like a supporter of the trade schools. You know, because we're like, you want to go to further university? Awesome. We will get behind you and support you on that. But that's not like the end all, you know, for our homeschool education. The cool thing about AO, Ambleside Online, which we are following for the most part, like we do the book schedule, we do the weekly schedule, giving and taking if we add like Plutarch or, and you know,
even if you're
whatever.
Not interested in doing it, it's still worth going and looking at all of the stuff
on there.
It is
a free online curriculum, and I always tell people, if anything else, get the books.
That's what I'm like. Just the books alone. Start collecting. I love going to the thrift store, and when I find a book that's like on the, recognize the covers and the names of the books. Start to begin to.
You're like, oh, I don't need this yet, but I will.
Right. And then you know when you see it to grab it. Because you will want those. Even if you do a different style of homeschooling. Like, it's important.
Totally. So that is free. You just have to buy your own books and stuff, which I feel like it's pretty reasonable. And the women that have been doing it and putting into it have so many years of experience. And everybody does it a little bit differently, you know, in their home and stuff. I feel like we've taken a very mellow approach to homeschool. I really haven't been so rigid. There have been certain things I expect and certain habits we've created, but we've had a very some seasons where we're just getting a lot done, and then seasons where we're just really enjoying each other's company. We're doing our math, we're reading good books together, we're getting outside. And through all of that, there's still so much fruit produced. And I think it comes back to that Deuteronomy, being together, you know, and really seeing their hearts. It's like, we do have that habit creation happening, family to family, year to year, season to season, whatever, but that heart connection, you know. And so it's like my kids are happy, you know, and I'm not like, I've done such an amazing job with every single one of them and they're perfect.
But they're themselves,
but they're happy
and they're humans.
And so it's like, then we're introducing them to like youth group and stuff like that, you know, and then they get in there and one of my kids came back, one of them, and was just really like confused and frustrated. He's like, so many people just seem like they're trying to be exactly like everybody else. Like he was so confused. Like, I don't get it.
Such a good homeschooler.
Yeah.
It's like the epitome of a homeschooler.
So
What is
funny,
this?
But it's that, and I think moms, we do that too.
Mm.
We're like, we want to be so unique and individual, but at the same time, we're just trying to like be like just like everybody else. And our home is ours. It's nobody else's, And so it's like, we all have those friends like, come on over, give me in a half an hour, like whatever. Yeah. And then we have those friends that were like, come on over, I didn't clean a thing. Like, you know what I mean? And we have to be a little bit more comfortable. I think Sally Clarkson, she said something, I'm going to butcher
Everything
it.
she says is so great.
I know, but it was like, your home should be just clean enough that people don't feel gross, but not too clean they don't feel uncomfortable, or something like that. And I was like, I can live with that, okay?
Which is a wonderful, wonderful balance.
So wisdom, so much wisdom.
The only thing, just, clean your toilet here, before people come over. Maybe clean the hand towel.
Yeah.
Like, you're good to go.
Yeah, oh my gosh. And change the hand towel real fast. Somebody clean the toilet and,
Oh.
Yeah.
Well,
kick all their shoes under the bed.
That's been weird with having 2 bathrooms. Like, I got to check that one before people will come. Because
so
that's full of
funny.
pills and Phoenixes.
I was reading this great aha moment.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Tell us your greatest aha moment.
It's silly, but it kind of wraps up parenting and schooling. My aunt, mother of 8, wonderful women in my family. And she was like, the nice thing about being a mom is if you don't like how it's working, you can change it. And it was like, I was a young mom, and I was just like, I can change
that is an aha moment.
It's,
wow.
Whether you're homeschooling and you're like, this isn't working right now. We need to figure out something. We need some help in whatever. Maybe we're going to have you do charter school for 2 days a week or whatever, because this kid needs more attention. You can change it. Mm-hmm. Or whether you have your kids in public school and you're like, this isn't working. I don't even know how to homeschool, but we need to change something. You can change it. And if you're the environment and the atmosphere in your house is just really awful, you can change it. And another one from you asked me something about being a better wife and mother, and all of that was somebody that shall not be named because she's very controversial.
Okay, don't say it.
But years ago, I read this book,
Bias.
and she said, "Be lovely."
I know who this is.
Yes, you do.
Oh, yes, I do.
Don't love all of the things, but it was so profound.
Right. Yeah.
Women are some of the most incredible and toxic people on the planet.
That is so true.
I have met some incredible women. Just like, I want to be like this woman. She's so wonderful and wise and elegant and just cool, And then you've got people that you're like, wow, that's bad, and it's that decision, whether it be our homeschooling journey, our marriage, our friendships. Be lovely. That doesn't mean you have to be fake. Maybe you don't have to share everything going through your mind, or whatever.
Disqualified.
Yeah. But be lovely. And I was like, sometimes our home is so unlovely where it's like everybody's bickering and there's all these things going on. It's like, what can I do to get back to that place where it's like, okay, this is lovely again, And it's not perfect. That's not the same thing. And sometimes I'm just like, go put all your books away right now. Everybody come back to the table. Like, we're starting morning time over again. And it's not often, but you'll have those days where it's like, I don't know what happened, but we got way off and we're crying over math over here and we're pissed off that we have to, clean the toilet and all these different things are going on. Let's start over again.
Yeah.
And let's get back to lovely and life-giving for us, And sometimes it means you have a day where you don't get very much done. But if you're back, together, and all of a sudden everybody's happier again.
I just read some mom's story. I don't know if it was on one of the books or something, but just where she laid on the floor. She's just like, I'm going to just lay on the floor. And everybody just kind of, all the kids kind of walked around, didn't know what to do at first. And then they sort of, just start over completely. Like, just chill out. And honestly, like, there is nothing more when I feel like the last few nights I've just been like, I'm going to sit on the couch. I'm just going to sit here and just sit with a cup of tea.
Just be.
Yeah, and just show them that I'm just going to sit here and not be. And when there's so much to do, it's so painful to do sometimes.
Yeah.
To just
Yeah.
reset, rebreathe,
Yeah.
or take a breath and recalibrate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And be lovely doesn't mean that all the things that are wrong are okay.
Exactly.
It just means I'm not going to react from that really
it's
kind
what
of
you can't control.
yuck stuff. Totally. Either to my kids or my husband, you know, or my friends. My gut reaction to the guy at the store is being a total jerk, you know, whatever. It's like, I'm going to start it lovely,
That's so
you
good.
know, and it doesn't always come out well, you know, but it's a good place to begin, you know. So I think that was a big aha moment for me. I was like, we have the power of our home to make it really toxic and just defeat us. I'm not doing enough. You're not doing enough. Just all this, or to make it really lovely.
Well, and especially because so many days are stressful, and we kind of forget
Yeah.
that not very few days are perfect.
Yeah.
Or without outside stressors from, you know, financial stuff, family stuff, whatever it is, sickness. But when you're saying this, be lovely, I think what it really speaks to is you're talking about the fruits of the spirit. Really, you know, that's in our control. It's one of the few things we can control is ourselves.
Yeah.
We really can't control our children or their attitudes or the day, especially with homeschooling and how people are. You know, if your kid's not getting something, I mean, we can try different ways to teach and all that, but
we can control where they throw a temper tantrum.
Right. There's certain things that we can do, but like I think the being lovely and setting the tone, it's amazing how, and that's why we do the stereotypical griping and complaining and trying to get attention as we're cleaning up everybody's stuff, is because we know we're setting the tone and they're going to feel uncomfortable and try and we're trying, you know, that's our
manipulation.
Right, our toxic, you know, very culturally trained manipulation that I fall into all the time, and I'm sure I'm not alone.
Just a little bit of sarcasm.
I definitely see it, and that's a very much cultural.
Sure.
A lot of that is, and that's very much what we're seeing in the world today, is to not be lovely and to not be a lovely wife. And as much as I don't love everything that person says, she's right on there, like, because it's just biblical. Because it's just, it doesn't mean you're a yes ma'am. Yes, I'm always going to be the perfect little submissive. You know, that stereotype.
No,
but it's
absolutely.
actually the opposite, because you're in control of yourself and your home, and you're actually powerful because you're following the basic steps he gives us, the biblical principles of you know, self-control and patience and goodness and gentleness, those things.
Absolutely.
Beautiful.
And it doesn't mean it's easy. You know?
Definitely not easy.
But it's good. It's super good, you know, so. And I think I love it and have loved it, not because it's been easy, but because of the fruit, both in my family and in myself, you know. And it's like, this is a good thing. It's one of those things that's worth the fight, you know, if we would be selfless. And I'm not saying, like, if you put your kids in public school, you are not selfless. It's not our job to go around judging while everybody does what they do, you know. But for me, I've just found it's life-giving, that place where it's like, yeah, it's going to cost me, you know, but I'm really happy with the payoff, you know, of what the cost has purchased, if you will, you know, the time with my kids.
I feel like we need to just end with that, because I feel like you've given us
a lot.
You've given us so much, and it was so excellent. So I'm encouraged, and I hope that this was encouraging to anybody watching. And this is why I wanted to record this, because I know that you have so much to offer. You know, you're so young, and you have young kids and slightly older, but you just have a lot that we can glean from. And you encourage me to be myself, which is like, I love that when somebody doesn't want to kind of push themselves on you or their things on you, but you allow the principles behind what you're saying to apply to me, right? And it's inspiring. So.
I hope. And I think too, everybody has read something from somebody who's like, I'm the expert on this. You know, I only have a 5-year-old, but I know it all, you know, and you're like, and I don't think we ever get to that place where we arrive. So just the encouragement to anybody where they're starting. Maybe they're weary and they've been doing this a while, you know, or they're just starting and feeling extremely overwhelmed, that it's doable, you know. Or
jumping from one season to another, because I know people that are starting with very little kids, that soon you're going to be like, oh, wow, this is getting harder, or we're going to jump into a different
I thought season. I had this handled, and now here we go, starting all over again. Right. And so many resources out there.
Yes.
Really, really so many.
Like we said, so many that are easily accessible now. My mom was saying, oh my goodness, if I had this or that, you know, you guys would have loved every part of your education.
My mom has said the same thing. Sure.
All right, well, I hope this was helpful. I hope this was fun. We had fun doing it. So thank you guys for watching. See you later.